How you doing, everyone? This is Matthias Atva from Dreadnought, your Dreadnought PS4 replay guy. Well, I was out of town and I did release a replay called White Lotus, which is really good. I thought it was pretty funny, but I did release it last weekend, so I didn't have a large gap in between posting of videos or content to the channel, so I was not able to play Monday through today, which is Thursday, October 24th, and I noticed when I got home and checked my comments that Manny had asked, "Hey D-Rec, are you going to release a patch video?" And then I realized there is a patch for Dreadnought, and yes, it is the Halloween market update patch. And you know, as soon as I logged in, as soon as I got home, I took a look at it and I bought right out of the gates the Aegis retrofit. Yes, we have our second, finally, retrofit in the game, and it is for the Jupiter Arms Dreadnought. And boy, do I like it. As you noticed, the cover art for this video, the thumbnail, is of my jumping Monarch with the new Aegis retrofit skin, and if you think it looks a little like an Imperial Star Destroyer, you'd be correct. So don't be surprised if you are playing Dreadnought and all of a sudden an Imperial class Star Destroyer jumps in on you and lays down the pain. I can't wait to play that ship, which I probably will this weekend. But there are a whole bunch of items in the market to celebrate Halloween for Dreadnought. Now, the first thing I should mention is that the previous Halloween items from last year are discounted 50%, so if you liked any of those items, you might want to pick them up. And the Reaper emblem, which was pretty hard to get, I was wondering where it could be found, is on sale as it was a previous item. So if you missed out on getting the Reaper, you may want to get that now that it's half off. There is a new emblem, which is the Raven figurehead, and it looks pretty cool too, but I am not sure that it is for me. But I do believe that it is also on sale. We also have new tattoos and tints for captains, but I think the best deal of this new Halloween market update has to be the Dead Horde bundle. Now, I was super excited about the second Aegis retrofit, and I picked it up immediately, and now I have both of the retrofits. But the Dead Horde bundle took me completely by surprise, and what it is, this is pretty amazing. It is a forecastle for every ship class in the game. So that'd be 15 different forecastles, and what it does is it just doesn't replace your forecastle, but it also adds all these cool little bits and plates to the rest of your ship, no matter what the rest of your ship has as far as its skin. And the forecastle has a massive place for your favorite emblem, or you could use the Dead Horde emblem. And of course, the Dead Horde fleet is from Havoc mode, and these are all Jupiter Arms ships that are controlled by the AI, and they come at you in waves. This is the only real PvE mode that we have for Dreadnought besides the tutorial or practice mode. And in this mode, all these AI ships have these pieces, parts added to them, and they're a specific color. Now, what's interesting about this is not only does it add these cool little plates and bits to your ship to make it look mean and ominous, but it isn't one particular color. It actually takes one of your second skin colors, no matter what paint job you choose, and applies it, and then adds sort of a rust color underneath it. And for 2,000 gold, it sounds steep, but remember, there are gold sales in the past and currently for the game, so it will either set you back maybe 10, maybe 20 bucks, and this is something you can use for absolutely every ship in the game, and I think it's pretty neat, and it was quite a surprise, and I'm very impressed that the devs for Dreadnought put this much thought into a nice little bundle. If it's not your thing, don't worry, but even if it fits one of your ships and makes it look a little cooler or a little more ominous for the spooky holiday season, I think it's a great deal and a great pickup. Lastly, for the new items, of course, we have the Indrik, which is a giant beetle for your space potato. There's no other way to say it. If you are sick of your Akula Vector Tactical looking like a giant space potato, you can make it look like a giant beetle instead. Enough said. So a lot of exciting items in the market, and if you want to pick them up, now is the time, as many of these Halloween items, including paint jobs and emblems, are 50% off, and some of the new items in the market are, in my opinion, pretty hot, and I did pick up a couple myself. This isn't all about the market, though. The Halloween patch also had some balance changes, and I thought these were pretty neat, and I had no idea that these were on the way. Now, we all use Dreadnoughts, or most of us do, and of course the go-to weapon for all Dreadnoughts at medium to short range for most players is the Dreadnought Repeater secondary weapon. Now, I didn't really complain about this, but it did hit me when I read this that, yeah, it does kind of kill gameplay. I tried using the flak secondary for a while, and it just doesn't have the range to do the damage that needs to be done. And when you're at close range, the repeaters do almost as much as the flak cannons do for Dreadnoughts. So when you take all that into account, yes, the flaks did have a higher DPS, but at more ranges, especially at the max range of repeaters, which is well into medium range at 3,400 meters, the repeaters really are overall the ace in the hole for your Dreadnought. And a lot of players thought, well, hey, that's really, you don't want a ship where its primary weapon is really its secondary weapon. And especially for Jupiter Arms Dreadnoughts, which are, let's say, very tanky and beefy, their guns are not what they're known for. And first of all, you can't even shoot outside of 5 kilometers. And once you're in 5 kilometers, you're really just tickling your enemies until you get into repeater range. And I'm not sure that that is going to change all that much, but they are attempting to subtly change the weapon mechanics of Dreadnoughts, and I think this is pretty neat. So listen up and we'll go over it real quick. So the problem with Dreadnoughts is that a lot of people say their primary weapons don't do it. They just don't put the damage out. They have too many drawbacks, and really Dreadnoughts just try to close in as quick as they can to use repeaters. So all the Dreadnought weapons have been buffed as far as their primary weapons. The repeaters have been nerfed just slightly, and the flak cannons have been buffed. Now, I was worried that if they took away repeaters, I would cry like a little baby, but that is not the case, and we'll go into that in a little more depth. But don't worry, these changes are very subtle, and I think they will just do nothing but improve the game. Besides Dreadnoughts, we also have Corvette beam weapons. I LOL every time I see these, and when I see a player using beam weapons from a Corvette, I automatically assume it's a bot until I read the name and start chuckling to myself, or out loud sometimes. But Corvette beam weapons increase the base damage. The fall off is much better so that you can use them up until their optimum range much more frequently. And the reason for this is, as a secondary weapon, the beam weapons were underperforming in their intended function of close range combat due to the damage falling off so abruptly and dramatically. So we all know that plasma weapons for the secondary of Corvettes are really good for close range spike or surprise. We also know bolt guns are really good for their utility and tactical flexibility, but the Corvette beam weapons were really left behind, especially in Tier 4 and Tier 5. So this is an attempt to make Corvette beam weapons sort of a very vicious knife fighting weapon that never needs to reload. If you overshoot your target but they're still in close range, or you sneak underneath them, you can really zap them hard with these beam weapons, even though I'm not sure you want to do this to destroyers armed with flak, but we'll see. So as it stands now, if you want tactical flexibility and range, you want to go with bolt guns. If you are an assault blink warper or you circle around a target at close range, you might want to try the plasma weapons. They do a lot of damage but are very inaccurate. Or if you like to close in very viciously, use surprise or maybe stealth, you can now maybe use the Corvette beam weapons again. On to desperate measures. In my last officer briefing video, which was the update for 2018, I did claim that desperate measures were past their best days, past the golden age of their use. A lot of players still use them. They're very popular with artillery cruisers and Brutus destroyers, as well as some very nifty and niche Dreadnought builds, believe it or not. But a lot of people stopped using desperate measures in favor of other officer briefings, but they still had this ridiculous ability. I know top 10 player of all time on PS4, Sixpack 7, uses desperate measures on his Dreadnought. So he'll come in and stack armor bonuses, and then when he gets disrupted or ruptured, he uses his shields to get that back online faster, and then when he's almost dead, desperate measures kicks in and the armor buffs kick in again, and by the time they wear off, he's taking damage on his shields, which are replenished, and the cycle just keeps going and going, and it's pretty annoying but surprisingly effective. There's always been a downside to desperate measures, and it's one use only. That's the downside. So if you use it once in a life, you'll have to die before you get it back again. However, there's a huge benefit to using them, and sometimes if you're about to finish someone off and desperate measures kicks in, it's almost impossible to kill them depending on their module build. So now desperate measures has been reduced. So instead of just refreshing all of your modules, it refreshes 20 seconds off the cooldown. Many times that's enough to get your modules back online, but now you can't go in with a suicide nuker and launch a nuke or flash torpedoes or something else and then use module reboot and then use desperate measures and fire the weapon again and then use module reboot again and fire the weapon again for 3, 4, 5 alpha strikes. That's not really going to happen anymore. They've also gone in and it doesn't fill up your tank. It gives you more energy, and as a compromise, they reduce the benefit of the ability. Now you can't go on suicide missions. But even though it has been nerfed, if you're using desperate measures properly as a last-ditch effort to get away or survive, it will still do that for you, I think. But I don't really think this hurts the game much, as I think there have been better uses of existing officer briefings besides desperate measures. It's still worth researching. It's still worth getting for certain builds. And even though it's nerfed now, it's still very good for defensive use, even though you won't be able to do suicide tricks with it like some players have done in the past. Moving on, the Skilla or Scylla torpedo. I don't know how many times they're going to play with this torpedo, but they are determined to make this a module worth taking. I can't even imagine a time, I don't remember that I ever used the Scylla torpedo in a serious match in an attempt to beat a record or have a good game to post on the channel. I understand its concept. It's a long-range nuke, but it's so temperamental. It used to have a lot of bugs, and they keep tweaking it to make it more effective. And I like how they're doing small changes to it, because if you basically overpower it and make it a long-range nuke that explodes and can be launched on the other side of the map and it does a lot of damage, it's really just annoying. So they're trying to make it damaging, effective, but the problem is how long it tracks, how long it travels, so they're trying to tweak these values. I'm really not going to go into this too much. If you are an avid Skillet torpedo user, I would read over the notes. If not, just know that these things are getting better with every patch, and soon you may have to start looking out for them, but I don't believe that they are ever going to be as effective as, let's say, flash torpedoes, storm missiles, some of the other heavy-hitting destroyer modules. But with the right combinations and the right build, you could catch some people by surprise with this torpedo. So back to the Dreadnought weapon changes. Basically, across the board, the primary weapons for Dreadnoughts, especially in Tier 3 and up, are all getting damage buffs. We see for Jupiter Arms, they are getting a buff and they are getting a refire improvement. So not only are you getting a damage buff per shot with the Jupiter Arms Dreadnoughts, but they are firing faster as well. So I think that's pretty interesting. The number of projectiles is changing and it is being increased as well. So I do believe that the Jupiter Arms main guns are still going to be fairly short range, but they're more akin to a perpetual shotgun blast. So especially corvettes may have to look out. You're going to get more DPS out of this, more projectiles. It'll be easier to hit. So I do think that this makes the Jupiter Arms Dreadnoughts a little better, but I don't think it's game-changing by any stretch of the imagination. And so Jupiter Arms Dreadnoughts, with lowering of the repeater secondary weapon and a small increase in their primary weapons, I think that overall it's going to be the same. There may be a small penalty for super tank, super brick type builds, but for jumping Jutlans or jumping Monarchs, you may want to switch to flak, and we'll get into that in a moment. For the Akula Vector, their range, of course, is staying the same, but we're getting a pretty dramatic increase to damage, especially at long range. So the Akula Vector Dreadnoughts are now going to be the Dreadnoughts that can really take it to you at long range, and even though it's very hard to hit with those primary weapons at long range because of their slow refire rate, every time you do land a shot, you are doing very good damage, and as you close in, of course, those weapons will do even more damage. Now if we look at the Oberon Dreadnoughts, if I'm reading this correctly, we are getting a fairly dramatic increase in damage, and we are also getting a much better refire rate and a better reload. So I think Oberon Dreadnoughts are really going to be the kings of DPS for the Dreadnought class, and we're seeing that their primary weapons are probably now better or on par with the repeater, and have the long range and have the quick refire rate, so you can get a bead on your target and keep pressure on your target at any range. So it might be beneficial for Oberon captains for Dreadnoughts to take the flak secondary so that they use their primary at all ranges and use the flak cannons at close range when someone gets too close for comfort. And I think that's a very interesting twist in the game, and I hope I'm reading that correctly. Now on to the repeater secondary. As you see here, there is a small nerf. It's only about 5-10 points per shot of damage, and I think that's okay. It's not robbing the weapon of what it was meant to do, to be that short, medium range secondary weapon that puts out damage and is also very useful in between reloads. Now on to the heavy flak turrets. You see that there is a fairly dramatic increase in damage. At low tier we have 180 to 210, at tier 5 315 to 320, and at tier 4 220 to 280. So why such a dramatic shift in tier 4 and not tier 5? Well, tier 4 flak guns were actually less damaging than repeaters at any range, which is pretty weird. So they corrected that, I think, and now you're seeing tier 3, tier 4 flak turrets are now worth taking depending on the range you'll be fighting at and what kind of build you have. And now at tier 5, where the flak turrets were doing more damage at close range than the repeaters and were worth taking for any jumping dreadnought, now they do just a little more damage, so that you might consider taking them if you're not a jumping dreadnought. And I think that's pretty interesting. And now we move on to the last part of the Halloween patch, and that is bug fixes. And all these bugs have to do with the market. The on sale percentage tag now displays so that you know what items are for sale and how much of a sale they are. Before, they just had a red line crossed with the old value and put the new value on it, so I could figure out what was on sale. But now it's a little easier to pick a sale item out of the crowd, and now you know exactly what percentage of a sale is on that item, so that's pretty beneficial. It's not game changing, but it's very useful. And the second bug fix is that the market carousels now wait longer if you click one of the page dots to view a particular item, and become useless just outside of that. I'm not sure what kind of message was being implied on the last part there. It looks like a grammatical error, but I did notice that when they're talking about the carousel, they mean those dots at the bottom of, hey, what's new in the market? So when those dots slowly move to the right to pan and show you what the next item is, they're going to wait a little longer. Now you can still quickly scroll through those dots and those items using your right controller stick. But if you just want to casually look at them, they're going to go a little slower, and I think that's okay. So I think that wraps it up here for the Halloween patch. I'm really impressed that we keep getting patches every couple months now. Sometimes it seems like once a month or once every month and a half, 2 months, and that's just fantastic. So it means that we are getting content. Maybe it's not earth-shattering content, a World of Warcraft expansion that blows everyone's mind, but we are getting new items in the market. We are getting very intelligent, well thought out balance changes that tweak the game for optimal gameplay and doesn't leave certain modules or ships in the dust. It brings older or underused items more current and to the fore of gameplay and meta, and I think that's great. And I assume we're probably going to get new market items for Thanksgiving or Christmas time frame. I don't know that for sure, but the way things are going, that looks like how it's going to be. I was really impressed with the Halloween market update for all the items in the market. It isn't just your run-of-the-mill, here's a skin or here's an emblem. There are some really good items there this month, and I do like the Dreadnought balance changes. We'll see. A couple other things are on my list to be changed, but I'm being patient to see what they're working on next. Sorry that I didn't get the Halloween market update out sooner. It is maybe a day late, but again, I was out of town for work, and I will be home for the weekend, so I plan on making at least one Dreadnought video, one Gundam video, and I will be working on, of course, the October Direct Dreadnought game and channel update. Well, here you go, Manny. Sorry for being late, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for asking. I'll be hitting the comments section tonight. I know I haven't answered you guys in 2 to 3 days, but we should be all up to date by tomorrow. Well, that's it from me for now, and I'll see you soon in Sinley Bay.